All of the lore from the kind of original, really in-depth Tolkien universe is woven into it. And the writing is beautiful, it's heartbreaking. I mean, I cried even reading the script. And so, you know, to be able to have such a sort of emotive reaction to just the words, I went, oh God, this is gonna look so good when it's sort of finalized in its anime form. Well, first of all, I went, she's a kick-ass female character, which I just think is fantastic. And, you know, there are so many of them in Lord of the Rings. What I loved about her is her journey is I think very different to, you know, Eowyn and Arwen, in the sense that she really matures and she really comes into her own as the film goes on. And you see her, you know, being given all these these mighty, mighty things that she has to hold on her shoulders, where at the beginning she's just been a tearaway child. And as you go on, there's this mounting sense that she has to defend her people, she has to be the savior. And I think that's wonderfully shown in her storyline. It's such an evocative medium, anime, you know, and I think that it does lend itself to Lord of the Rings. Because, you know, I think one of the first things you'd think about when you think of Lord of the Rings are the landscapes. And they're just so beautiful, they look so beautiful in anime. And I think that you get, you know, the sense of the light and dark with it as well. I just think it does lend itself very well, in my opinion, to the Tolkien world, because you've got the Ents, you've got the, you know, you have all these beautiful characters that I think drawn would look so, or animated would look so beautiful. And because it's anime, which is in itself, I think, an incredible art form, you know, as I said, watching everything that needs to be done to get from the drawing stage to the anime stage is a marathon. So I think it does lend itself very well. Hearing Brian's voice for the first time was amazing, and I love as well that he's chosen to, you know, he's Scottish, but he's just doing a much more almost Viking-esque, you know, the character, the way that he's playing Helm. But I mean, hearing him in my ear and then playing back to him is amazing, because there's such a depth and such a richness to his voice and the way that he plays Helm, that you can't help it having an effect on you, and then obviously an effect on the way that you then play, or Hera. So that was amazing, and the scenes that we have between Helm and Hera are beautiful, and I think will be very, very, very fun to see.
It feels good to be back in Middle Earth. It was lovely to catch up with Phil. It was such a very special time working on Lord of the Rings, and it was really lovely to be asked back and revisit a character. It's not often that you get to go back to something you've played that was so much a part of your life and that you loved so much. And so, yeah, I was really tickled when Phil rang me. Playing Eowyn as a narrator is a different perspective than playing her as when I played her in Lord of the Rings. Obviously, this is her telling a story from the past, but it's also her being older at this point and telling the story. So she's telling the story from a woman's perspective, I think. And she's telling a sort of a slightly parallel story of a young woman called Hera. And it's been interesting because when I was Eowyn, I was more in the action and having things happen to me and very in a reactive sort of state, whereas this is more empathizing with somebody else's story and having that kind of distance, the way to emotionally identify with something, but have the foresight to know how the story ends. Yeah, I mean, it's a different perspective being a narrator in this, but I actually really love working in the studio. I find it a really intimate space to work in, and I'm one of these strange actors who actually really enjoy doing ADR and coming into the studio afterwards, and the intimacy and the privacy of working like that. And I often find, like, I can find extra things in ADR that are harder to find on the day when there's so many people around. I think I'm just a natural introvert. So it's been really fun to come in and see Eowyn as someone who's really telling a story of another young woman.
Well, the way I really knew that Kenji was pleased with the take was we would move on to the next line. Or we would move on to the next. That was when I knew that he was really happy with what he got. And then if I knew that when I knew we were on the right lines, and if we just needed to get another couple of takes for safety, you'd get one of those. You'd get like a slight little nod with a little smile on his face, and then he'd go back to writing his notes or whatever. So that's when I knew. But when you really knew that you were onto something was when you moved on to the next line. Yeah, the recording process, spanned over a couple of years. I think we started recording in 2021 maybe, and then didn't finish recording until early 2024. It is quite the process, and you don't really realize how much work actually goes into making something like this. But the illustration, every time I went back to do a bit of recording, they showed me a little bit more of the movie already finished. So this sequence would be edited, or they would have the sound on this sequence, or they'd have the score, the temporary score. So you kind of got to see the movie evolve as we were recording it. But up until sort of only recently, I never really got the full effect of quite the scale of what we were making until recently. But after seeing it, after my most recent recording, my final recording for the movie, I'm very excited. I mean, to name just one thing that I love the most about making this movie is a near impossibility. I mean, I love the fact that I'm now part of this. Part of the Tolkien world. I'm part of Middle Earth. I've got to work with some amazing performers and artists that I've looked up to for many years. And I get to work with, the likes of Philippa and Kenji and everybody else that's been a part of it in the studio and outside of the studio. And it's just been, honestly, just an absolute dream to have had this opportunity. So to name one thing would be doing all of the other things an absolute disservice. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved it. I think the thing that the audience will love the most is the fact that we are making a Lord of the Rings movie. Just because it's anime and we're working with an anime director like Kenji is amazing, is the amazement of him. I don't think it takes away from the fact that it's not a live action movie. I think all of the pieces will come together, have come together. And I think the audience are just going to be looking forward to seeing Middle Earth in a new format. And I think it's just going to be great.
Well, there are these characters in life who we see historically, like Churchill, like great leaders that have done the most extraordinary things, and Napoleon, and who become, larger than their myth, really. And Helm is part of that tradition. He is the king of kings. He is the leader, the natural leader, but he's also a ruler. He rules with a balanced hand, and I think that's what's so interesting about him as a character, that he does have this ability to rule, and he has this ability to understand who he is in a historical context. And he keeps talking about the fact that his sons will inherit. And the idea that they will inherit, when that all goes wrong, he has to then do this massive rethink and reassess his daughter. So there's a kind of voyage of discovery as well at the same time for old Helm. And it makes for a real, from an acting point of view, it makes an interesting dynamic to play. It's not just all one note. I suppose really, the amount of characters I've played who are leaders and men of action and men who run events, And they all inform really one, especially classically, if you start off with somebody like King Lear or the Roman general Titus Andronicus, they are these kind of sort of, they're regarded now as dinosaurs really, but they are these men of action who would precipitate events and be driven by certain things and have tremendous drive. It's the drive that's in these characters. It's the sort of demonic that comes out of them and that's what's always thrilling to do, especially as a character like Helm, who has tremendous demonic energy, and yet he's also got this other side to him. He kind of underestimates his daughter. And also Hera is really, there's something quite modern about Hera. She's a sort of emancipated woman in her own right, and the father is playing catch up. He hasn't quite caught up to her, and he realizes that she is extraordinary, and that she has probably more skill than even her brothers has. But of course, the tradition says that the woman is the one to be cherished and taken care of, and the one that stays at home. But this is sort of anticipating a shift in that dynamic. And that is what's interesting from Helm's point of view, because he's confused by it, he acknowledges it, he sees it, he's not a fool, but he also knows that he also, fatherly, wants to protect her and doesn't want to put her in harm's way, because he's lived his life in harm's way. And I think in the end of the day, he doesn't want his daughter to live that life.
I was sent an email off my agent saying, would I like to audition for Lord of the Rings? And I don't think I read past that. I think I immediately just wrote back and went, yes. Then I looked back in it and saw that it was animated, which got me really, really excited. And it's bizarre, isn't it? The idea of anime and Lord of the Rings, for some reason, really fits. As soon as you say it to people, they go, that makes 100% sense. So I was just really excited about it, really. So I got the script, read the script, and then I auditioned at home. I put myself on audio tape, 2 or 3 different versions, and sent it back in, and luckily was offered the part. No matter which character I play, it's why there's certain kinds of people I won't play, but I think it's really important as an actor that you can defend a character and that you can understand where they're coming from and their perspective and what their version of the story is in a way. And if you can't defend them, then don't play them. That's how I kind of feel about characters. So I immediately looked and just thought, this is a guy who, he's massive, he's strong, he's a leader, he's, Lord of Rohan, and he's probably got people in his ear constantly giving it some, you should be, you've got a very, very faint line to the throne. You should be that person, you should be king, blah, 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 eating away at him. And I think he just hit a point where we joined the story where he's had enough and things have to change. And I really like that about him. I mean, he's a brute, don't get me wrong, he's an absolute brute, and you wouldn't really want to be in his company, you definitely wouldn't want to be his son. But yeah, I think it all comes from, 1,000 different things that cause him to be the way he is, in a way. If I remember rightly, it's kind of just slightly mentioned. The Battle of Helm's Deep is just kind of touched on within the films and the books. So the idea that we were then going to explore this whole kind of mythology and open up this canon of history that we could plunder, for want of a better word, got me really excited. And it's a great story, and Helm's such a kind of great mythical character. So I got really excited, yeah. But I'm also a fan, so. Philippa Boyens is brilliant. She is absolutely. I genuinely, what is really lovely about her daughter, Kamiyama-san, everybody, is that when you stepped it's funny because they gave us a present which meant kind of bringing us into the family of, the Tolkien family, the Rohan family, as it were. But you did feel like you were entering a family business and that you were going to be part of something bigger than even just the films together, that it's a huge, huge passion project, the whole thing. So you felt immediately at ease that you were going to be looked after and you were in a safe space, and these were people that care and who are brilliant at the job.
Yeah, so he's the eldest of 3 siblings, and he's described as a towering brawler. His kind of most comfortable place is on the battlefield. He's grown up with his dad fighting orcs and done lendings and all sorts, and he knows nothing else really. So he's a kind of devoted family man, very protective of his little brother and his little sister. And Helm is very much his hero. The idea is that Haleth has spent a lot of time with his father on the battlefield, where his little brother and sister have been at home. So there's kind of a difference in their relationship there. Their mother died when Hera was born, so I think they're naturally very protective of each other and quite a tight family. We love a story that's about good and evil, and whilst it's not that simple, it is just a little bit simpler than real life, where we know it's all grey areas and stuff. We know who we're fighting for and who we're fighting against, and it's kind of very reassuring, that allegorical sense of it. There's always hope, even at the darkest times. We're like, we're going to pull out of this. So I think it's universal. It will always have some relevance to contemporary society, and it's just so detailed. There's so much depth in the world. Like, you cannot get to the end of it.
I love my character. I love Olwen. She is a true warrior. She's a true warrior because she is strong physically, but she has a terrific inner strength. She's bold, she's funny, she's courageous, she's loyal, she's a skilled soldier. I haven't played that before, so that's really fantastic. And she is a very loyal caretaker to Hera. For me personally, I have lived with Lord of the Rings for a good 20 years now, and so it was really brilliant to be asked to do this. I was very flattered and very excited. As part of my research, I basically read the foreword, because there's a lot of information in there about the people, the Rohan people. I read the appendices. There's a lot of information in there, and I watched the films again, which was incredible. I mean, especially the Two Towers, which I familiarised myself with the people, the landscapes, their homes, and tonally, it felt very familiar. I think that Tolkien is exceptionally connected to the world of archetypal characters. They are universal. They speak to generation after generation, and I believe that when these stories are being told, they resonate with whatever is happening in society at that particular time. Tolkien is brilliant at building worlds. He's a great world builder. He's an expert at creating customs, laws, rules, languages, and structures of societies for each of the cultures in his stories. The detail in his story is extraordinary. They're very specific and far-reaching, so that you begin to feel that his worlds actually exist. I feel like it's almost like part of my history. It's like you just believe that it exists. It's like War of the Roses, War of the Rohirrim. It's kind of part of who we are.
Good fantasy, sci-fi, it toes that line between providing escapism for the audience, taking you into a new world that's full of creatures that you have not seen before, whilst also simultaneously, thematically, reminding you of the world in which you live. And like good sci-fi and good fantasy seems to do it. Tolkien. I also think when I was in preparation for this, Tolkien, the amount of detail, the depth of the detail he puts into the worlds that he's created. If you're going to put that amount in, I mean, maybe it's the romantic in me talking, but if you're going to put that amount in, a lot of people are going to end up taking a lot out of it. And that will then be incessant and it will just keep going on forever and ever and ever. I think. Maybe that's just a romantic theory. I don't know. How does Hera embody the best of Tolkien's heroes' quality? That's such a great question. I think about what are his heroes. I mean, she's got the fearlessness and the bravery, which I suppose is synonymous with each other, that you see in the warriors. But she's also got that curiosity, a sort of cheekiness and an audacity that you see in Bilbo, loves his adventures, and to an extent so does Frodo. But no matter how tough and fierce and violent she can be when she's needs to be, I think her overarching and what really drives her always is love. It's love for her family, her people, and where she's from. And the righteousness, the justified righteousness that I think you see in all Tolkien's heroes and heroines. And she has it all. She has a blend. She's got it good, actually, Hera. She's got all the best qualities from all our heroes and heroines throughout the Lord of the Rings series. It's been amazing. I've done ADR and voice work before, but there has been something quite unique about this one where we go in and we are really in the body and in the voice. Obviously working with Philippa and Artie, Kenji, it's been a life-changing experience. I've never done anything on this scale, but watching, because we've been doing it over a few years, so watching the actual visuals come together, because the first time I went to the studio, there weren't. So I was having to imagine everything. And the second time, there's a few more little clips. And then now this time, it's becoming a fully realized world in front of your eyes. So you have to sort of reel yourself back from being in awe of what you're seeing and remember that you're still, voice acting. I suppose is the term I'm looking for. But that's been new. I've never had that kind of experience before. But wow, what an experience. It's become more and more apparent through the realization of the visuals over time. So I remember when we first did the recording about 2 years ago, a lot of it was described to me, this is what's gonna happen. It's gonna be like this. And it's like, but it is hard to envision just through, verbal communication. But then seeing it all come together and seeing how the worlds of anime and Middle Earth are starting to be married and fused. That's how the vision becomes clearer. And not so much like through, verbal communication, but just by seeing this thing come together over time, you start to get a sense of what he is achieving and will achieve. And I'm as excited as any of the fans are to see this final thing. It's looking real good.
The first time we recorded was in June 2022, and Kenji, the director, had shown me a brief sketch of Leaf, and I was like, this guy's so cute. And then it's been amazing, the process of watching this film come together, because the first time I recorded, there was no film. So I just recorded with someone else reading their lines opposite me, as if we were doing a scene. The second time I recorded, we had bits and pieces of the film that were spliced together with CGI, graphics of just human beings without faces and stuff, and even spliced together with just stop motion drawings that people had drawn in the studios in Japan. And now coming in, it's a full film. So it's amazing to have seen it at each stage of the process. And it's a very specific experience to anime, I guess, is that you see it across all these different mediums, because it's on the one hand drawing, but then also CGI and graphic design. And you can see it all come together in a way that you can't with TV or film, because you're just filming, Lord of the Rings as a franchise is very, on the one hand, analog. It's not this kind of sci-fi thing. It's a fantasy that feels like it's set in a quite a traditional space. But on the other hand, it is this sort of fantastical world that really sparks your imagination. In the same way, anime is a very traditional form in a way of creating stories. It's drawing at its heart, but also through the drawings you can unlock all sorts of different elements of life that aren't part of the real world, just like the original series. So I think they kind of lend themselves quite well to each other. I think the battle sequences are very special in this film. The stuff with the Muma kill specifically, I think is gonna look gorgeous. I think it's an amazing bit of history, in the Lord of the Rings world. And Just visually, it's so exciting. Like it looks beautiful, and I think it's just a visual treat, a plot treat and a character treat. Like you couldn't ask for much more. I think, like with the Lord of the Rings film, I think they've really hit it out of the park.
Kenji's like the silent assassin, you know what I mean? As I said, he doesn't speak English, if at all. So everything's through translation, but what you do get from him is an incredible attention to detail. He's very warm in his approach. And like I always know if I hit the right note on something, I'll hear, or I can see a little nod in the background, and that's all I need, you know what I mean? That's all I need. It's epic. And, anime in its delivery is epic. Even if you just get a shot of someone just turning their head and looking at something, that tells a story in itself. So when you got something like this, I just think it was a perfect marriage. And coupled with the fact that apparently Tolkien, when he went to college and stuff like that, he bought some Japanese art and put on his wall and stuff like that. So it seems like he's come sort of full circle back to where it really should be. But I think the style of this works. The battle scenes work in the style of this. The expressions work in the style of this. The intent works in the style of this. Well, you can expect that the soul of Lord of the Rings is very much running through it. And I think just the anime style of it and the direction behind it should give it a whole new level of excitement. I'm excited to see it. So, some hardcore fans really should be excited to see it.
So Hummer, the character, is a lover, not a fighter in his heart, I think. He is a warrior, poet, a bard, and he's pulled into the conflicts that his father and his kingdom get involved in. And he's free-spirited, but I think not as free-spirited as Hera, his sister. And he almost envies her for her ability to really be who she wants to be. Obviously, I would say personally that Hammer would want to get involved in any fighting. He'd just want to sit with his lyre and play that all day and just, spread love in the world. But that's not, unfortunately, the world that they live in. And I don't think he has the vision to be able to change that. Audiences, I think, are going to love seeing Middle Earth through the lens of the medium that we have, so that being anime. It's something that's never been done before in the universe of that Tolkien created. I'm personally excited to see what it's going to look like, because we're at very early stages right now, so I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm really excited to see that, because we already have a very set lore and a very set kind of art style. Everyone knows what the orcs look like, everyone knows what the elves look like, and so to see that interpretation manifested in anime, I think is going to be really special.
It's been such a cool process. You obviously have things in your mind of what these characters look like, and then getting to see what Kenji Kamiyama has done with the designs was one of the funnest parts for me. And so often it was what I was seeing, it was just, especially with Hera, it was just really bringing that voice that you've had in your head all this time to life. It was really, really cool.
I just think we were so incredibly lucky with the cast. Leaf, Bilal, just...
Wolf, Luke, just
everyone.
Honestly, everyone, yeah.
Incredibly lucky. I just don't think there's such a strong cast.
Sean Dooley, what a dude.
Fricka.
Playing Fricka, coming into that presence that he carries, and the way, again, that Kamiyama... See, that's interesting. That was one where the character that he drew, I was sort of thinking more of a muscular guy, and then Kamiyama drew this softer, rounder, which makes sense. It's in the text. But the way that came together with that voice of Sean and how he embodied that character carried so much weight, which was so critical for that moment. Someone who can challenge Hammerhand. And
there's only one person, Sean Dooley.
He really brought it.
He's only in it for sort of 2 scenes.
And he steals the show.
He really does. Sean is absolutely incredible.
Such a fantastic process. Getting to sit in and watch how he really talked himself through all of the thought processes of his character and then launched into his lines. It's so cool. I was really drawn to this, funnily enough, because it is a story of men and women, human men and women, and taking a really deep dive into their part of Middle Earth. And, you know, it's so relatable for us, and this notion of these people tearing themselves apart. And yes, we have the creatures and the sort of flavors of Tolkien's wider world, but I thought this was really interesting to actually take a look at the men and women of Middle Earth. He just is Helm Hammerhand. Isn't he Helm Hammerhand? Who, again, it's like, who else could have done this now that you've seen him in that role?
Or heard him.
You know, heard him in that role, yeah. See, I'm just buying it. He just is so in sync with that character. Again, played the vulnerabilities incredibly well. It could have become very one-dimensional, but obviously with an actor of his caliber, he just soared through it. He brought so much colour to that character in those moments.
What was interesting is that, I mean, you think that it's animation and you think that, and especially anime, it's this sort of, how do you bring the humanity and sincerity of the characters that we tried to create into a sort of hand-drawn world? And I mean, not only is it the magic of the animators in Japan and the rest of the world doing incredible work, but also just how amazing our cast were. Mm-hmm. I mean, what Luke brings to Wolf is pretty amazing.
So incredible.
But also the hand-drawn nature of the film is just so beautiful.
Mm.
It's unlike anything else being released at the moment. There's something, it's a sort of poetic's even the wrong word. It's sort of like, it's a nostalgic epicness that it brings out of you while you're watching it on a big screen. There's an excitement in the actual animation. There's an excitement that it brings out of you, just seeing it, how beautiful and how epic it is, and sort of the hand-drawn nature of it just gives it a different feeling. That it's actually very difficult to explain unless you see it on a big screen. It really is. I mean, it is
just
difficult.
Have to see it on a big screen.
As soon as they said anime, I thought Rohirrim, and I've always loved even though it's only a page and a half in the appendices, I've always loved that particular piece of that little thread of story, not only because of the reverberations that Helm's Deep and Helm Hammerhand have in the larger tale told in The Lord of the Rings, but because I think you could see in there, it was like, I think to me, Professor Tolkien had a larger story in mind, had he had the chance to tell more of it. Really interesting conflict that he set up there. And so, you know, it just lent itself to the idea that, one, I felt it would mesh well, sitting within the tradition of great Japanese filmmaking with a great Japanese filmmaker in Kenji Kamiyama, but also it is a standalone story. The world of Middle Earth that fans are so used to is there, but it's on the outskirts of the story. So you are very much focused on the characters and the people who inhabit the story, and it's called the War of the Rohirrim, because it is ultimately about peoples tearing themselves apart, and then the wreckage of that war that follows. One of the other things that attracted us immediately to the story was this unnamed daughter, which I have to say, as a female screenwriter myself, I found that really intriguing and interesting. She is so central to the conflict, and yet she remains unnamed. Now, I don't think that was in any way Professor Tolkien dismissing her. It was, again, I think he didn't get around to telling that part of the story. And so it was really interesting for us to be able to go and explore her. And immediately when you think about this girl who would have been caught in this conflict, where she is basically this point of contention between this power struggle, because who she marries may have serious implications for who might end up ruling Rohan. And she begins to understand that, or you begin to understand as you read this, wow, she was this pawn. What agency did she have, or could she have had? One of the things that happens when you start casting a character is the actor starts bringing their own take to how they're going to bring this character to life. And one of the great gifts, I think, that came to us was Gaia Wise playing the character of Hera. She has this, she is someone who is innately curious and interested and quick. She's got this ready laugh. She is, she's tomboyish in a way, and yet she's also, and she's very physically able as well. But she's also just got this incredible heart. And, she's the actor who walks in the room and goes, how are you guys doing? She's very giving as an actor as well. And so what started to happen was we started, this Hera started to become more and more real. The more and more we got to work with Gaia. And I've got to give a lot of that credit to Phoebe Gittins, who's one of the screenwriters on this, in that what was great about this is we had a young female writer writing a young character for this great young female actress. And I think that you can feel that coming through. And what was great about that was that Kenji embraced that so wholeheartedly. I think he actually liked the fact that this female character was in the hands of these young women, and he really supported them on that journey to bringing her to life. And I think that's what you feel when you see this movie. You feel her energy, you feel her passion, you feel her fear. She feels real. And she's immediately, I think audiences are going to be drawn to her immediately. And in a funny way, you're going to go, whoa, I didn't expect to feel this, about an animated character. But I think all the anime fans out there are going to go, yeah, of course, because that's what anime can do. I have to give credit for the choice of Kenji Kamiyama as director of this project to Sam Register and Jason DeMarco at Warner Brothers. They had this instinct. They have had a long working relationship with him and with Joseph Chu, our other producer, who is equally brilliant. And so when they mentioned Kenji Kamiyama to me, I had seen his stuff. I don't think I'd realized I'd seen as much as I had. But what I did know was that, visually, he is a master. He just is. He's masterful and meticulous. But the other thing that intrigued me, which I didn't know, is he's also a writer, and he's a really good writer. And so that I learned how to do this working with a great director, Peter Jackson, who is a great writer. So I love that. I love when you have a director who also has such a strong storytelling instinct himself. And so that's what happened. And I have just learned so much watching Kenji work. If you watch him direct, especially doing the ADR, because he'd say he doesn't speak English, but I think he understands quite a lot. But he's listening for the intention of the line, while I'm literally kind of following the specifics of the text. And what's so interesting is he will often, out of the corner of my eye, I will see him going like this. And, because he can hear it. He can hear the intention, he can hear the emotion. And I love those moments. And sometimes when he gives a note, it's like he is literally conducting.
追称ヘルムのねストーリー を今回はアニメーションにしたらどうかっていう話だったので、原作を読んだ時にまず最初に感じたのは、トールキンの原作ではあるけれども人間の話だったことですよね。ローハンの人間同士の戦いで、ヘルムハマーハンドっていうローハン史上最強の王であったというふうに伝えられてるし、当然ヒーローなんだけれども、ある種その自分の強さを過信したことでローハンのこう血筋をね一度絶やすことになるっていうストーリーで、ハマハンドのキャラクターそのものの魅力もあるけれども、やっぱ彼のこう辿った人生にね、すごく今の時代にまたこう戦争の影がねすごく世界を覆い始めた時代に力を信じすぎた王様の敗北を描いたストーリーっていうのがある種今の時代にすごくマッチしてるんじゃないかっていうのが一番最初の感想でしたね。手書きのアニメーションの良さっていうのはやっぱり人が手でこんな絵を全部描いたのかっていう驚きなんですよね。これはそのアニメーションを知ってるとか知らないとか関係なく、アニメーション手書きのアニメーションを一般の観客が見た時にこう無意識に感じる凄さなんですよね。手で描いてるんだ、人間がこれを描いてるんだ、それは実写でいうところの生身の人間がこんなすごいことを演じるんだっていうのと一緒で、手書きでこれほどの動きをなるべくリアルに表現するっていうのを手で描いてるっていうのがこう一つ凄みになるだろうと僕は思ったんですね。で、親戚ぐらいの血のつながりがあるつもりで作ってはいましたね。本当に上田にも全面的にそのデザインを見せていただいたり、彼らがやっぱり3部作を作ってきた積み重ねてきたその設定であるとか美術だったりっていう部分っていうのを見せてもらってね、これをここの延長上にあるっていうか、そこから過去を探って作っていくことにした方がやっぱりその関連していた方が映画の厚みっていうのも出てくるだろう。それもあってで新たなストーリーも生まれてくるんですよね。僕が今まで作ってきた作品も女性が主人公の作品が多かったんですね。で偶然ではあるんだけれども、やっぱそのリーダーシップを持っている女性が屈強な男たちをね支持して行動していくっていうのはアニメーションを今までも作る中ですごく面白いなと思ってたんですね。その構造が本来その弱い守られる立場っていう風に映画の中ではよく書かれていた女性が自ら行動していくっていうのが表のストーリーだけではなくて、そこにすごくこう深い構造ができる、女性を主人公にする魅力ってそういうところがあるなっていうふうに思っていて、アニメーションで表現するときは女性がヒロインっていうのはすごくマッチするんですよね。説得力がそこにすごく出てくる。なのでこれは僕が今までやってきた得意な手つきでもあるんだけれども、それも活かせるんじゃないかなというふうにすごく感じた部分ですよ。ただその女の子のキャラクターがいいよってことではなくてね、そう説得力のある女性が見てもそのキャラクターに感情移入できる、そしてかつその女性の持っている強さであるとか、そういったものをこうストーリーの中に 織り込んでいかなければいけないということで、その部分はこう何度もディスカッションしながら作っていきましたね。でさらにそのフィリッパが本格的に参加してくださるということになったので、ピーター・ジャクソン・フランが3部作で作ったどうやって作ってきたのかっていうことであるとか、そのデザインの部分であるとか、そういったものも全て見せていただいて、でなるほどとここまで作り込まれてるんだっていうね、そういうのも全てこう見せていただいて、ローハンの設定だったりはもうそのままアニメの方にも同じものを共有して作っていくことができるようになっていってですね、どんどんこう3部作とのこうつながりであるとか、3部作がどうやってあれを作っていたのかっていうその裏側みたいなものを作っていく中で見せていただくことですごくこう映像にこう説得力を持たせることができたというふうに思ってます。
People are used to seeing it now in the trilogies and the Hobbit movies that Peter Jackson has directed, and that image, I mean, it's an unshakable thing. And so I think how we approached it from Japan was not to try to do something new to it, but to be part of that universe and to be accepted as part of that universe, because it had to be that Peter Jackson verse movie. And so approach was to become that, but how do we express it in a different canvas? How do we contribute to that world? I think that's probably the approach that we took, rather than let's do something new and innovative that's never been done before. But will people see it and accept it as this world was very, very important to us. I think Jason DeMarco, who's one of the producers of the film, and I also look back, and we just often talk about how really literally there was no one else who could have taken on this other than Kenji. The reason being, Kenji's one of the few brilliant director-writer. I'm careful saying there because I'm not saying writer-director. He's a director-writer. He writes all his films. He writes all his series. He's actually a script writer as well as a director. So he really knows a way around crafting a story and a script. And but that person needed to be flexible enough, because in Japan, directors tend to have ironclad control of any production. But this production is so huge and it's such an established franchise that it needed collaboration. So when they're trying to create this, beautiful picture themselves and realistic movements or rendering of a character and horses moving and okay, how do you make it realistic but also impressive? That is a sakuga, hand-drawn animated film. That was the key. Okay, but it's an impossible task, actually near impossible task to do it all by hand. But somehow somebody went in and actually did that. And for him, that's the point. So people look at it, it's like, whoa, people actually draw that? Like I think that's what he wanted. That feeling of something real that went behind it, the real effort that went behind it, the real artistry that went behind it. I think the director really wants people to see that. And he thinks that's probably how you have a hope against these wonderful, huge, big CG, VFX-laden blockbusters. The way to do it is not to copy it, but to show human effort, to show the real human artistry behind it, but to render it as real as we could in our own interpretation that people would find beautiful as an image. And that's something I think the director really went for.
Kenji Kamiyama, I'm so happy he came on board the film because, and he's the reason I suggested him to my co-producer Joseph Cho was that I knew we needed somebody who was a steady hand and a pro who not only could appreciate taking Western material, fundamentally Western material, Western myths based on a Western writer's, ideas into a format that is very purely Eastern. And Kamiyama's very good at that. And he's also very good at sort of slow, considered, almost methodical approaches to storytelling, which I thought would be really interesting because Lord of the Rings is, obviously Tolkien's writing was methodical. He wrote the thing for 30 years or whatever. But I think people think of it like these big set pieces and big things happening all the time. And I think what Kamiyama brought to it was not being afraid of quiet moments, was not being afraid of sort of giving you a moment to sort of sink into it in a way. And I think that's sort of his approach as a director in his work. And so it made a really interesting amalgam of sort of the things you might have seen in Peter's films and the things you might have seen in Kamiyama's work. And it really does feel to me as an East meets West thing in a way that I really hoped would work, but wasn't sure if it would. And thankfully, I think it has. So it was tricky because when we started this film, we knew we would be collaborating with Philippa Boyens, who obviously had been integral to the original 6 films. But we weren't sure is this set in the Peter Jackson version of Lord of the Rings? We weren't sure at the beginning. And quickly it was sort of decided, we feel like it kind of should be by all parties. And it made it tricky because we're adapting an adaptation of something else. And the worry is you're twice removed from the original source material, and does it start to feel like this just isn't Tolkien? So the way that I think Kamiyama and we wanted to combat that was when we could, because the medium of animation is going to make it look different anyway, period, baseline. And then anime is probably another step. So what we wanted to do is where we are going to show something like Medjugorje or the Hornburg, or even something as simple as the designs, the Rohirrim designs on armor and stuff. We wanted it to come from the place of let's go and pull what was done for the original films and evolve it slightly to work for animation. But other than that, make it recognizable to anyone who watched The Two Towers. Oh, this is the same place. Because once you are collaborating with Peter Jackson, you want to do his vision justice just as much as you want to do Tolkien's vision justice, because his vision was a classic set of films. So I think that was a big challenge in the early days of the film, and one that it really helped to have all the folks from, Weta on board helping us concept design and stuff. And then ironically, once we kind of got over the initial sort of hump, it started getting really easy to make sure it's like we slotted in and then we were in a groove and everything started feeling right. We knew when we approached this, we did not want to do an animated film that happened to be in theaters. We were doing a theatrical animation, which again, there hasn't been a 2D theatrical animation in a long time. It's somewhat extinct in the US. And we knew what that meant was a higher quality of line weight, more detailed paintings, more fluid animation than you normally would ever see in a television show or even an animated film that was maybe showed up on a streaming service or something. We wanted this needs to be seen in a theater for you to get the full experience. And having seen it projected in IMAX, I am happy that the images look gorgeous, huge, because the movie's huge. I mean, it kept getting bigger as we wrote it. We, as our writers wrote it, and as we worked on it, we kept being like, this movie is so huge. And even the smallest version of a Lord of the Rings film is still a massive undertaking. And it feels like it when you watch it. So I would say, it'll work on any screen, like anything good does. But like anything really good, you want to see it on a big screen.